Theme 11: Rebels and the Raj. The Revolt of 1857 and its representations. Late in the afternoon of 10 May 1857, the sepoys in the cantonment of the Meerut broke out in mutiny. The telegraph line to Delhi was cut. First point: the pattern of the rebellion. 1a. How the mutinies began. The sepoys began their action with a signal. In many places, it was firing of the evening gun or the sounding of the bugle. Next arrow. Bell of arms is a storeroom in which the weapons are kept. Next arrow. Firangi, a term of Persian origin, possibly derived from the franc, from which France gets its name, is used in Urdu and Hindi, often in a derogatory sense to designate foreigners. Next point. Proclamations in the Hindi, Urdu, and Persian were put up in the cities calling upon the population. In major towns like the Lucknow, Kanpur, and Bareilly, moneylenders and the rich also became the objects of the rebel wrath. Peasants not only saw them as oppressors but also an allies of the British. The mutiny in the Sepoy ranks quickly became a rebellion. Next arrow. Mutiny. Mutiny is a collective disobedience of rules and regulations within the armed forces. Revolt. Revolt is a rebellion of people against established authority and power. The term revolt and rebellion can be used synonymously. Next arrow. In the context of the 1857 revolt, the term revolt refers primarily to the uprising of the civilian population, that is, peasants, zamindars, rajas, and jagirdars, while the mutiny was of the sepoys. Next arrow. Yam. Yam means Arvi. Kunjaras meaning vegetable growers. Kunjaras meaning vegetable growers. Vegetable growers were also known as Kunjaras. Sharfas meaning gentility. Shurfas meaning gentility. Halal khors meaning righteous, and haram khors meaning corrupt. 1b. Lines of communication. The reasons the reason for the similarity in the pattern of the revolt in the different places lay partly in its planning and coordination. It is clear that there was communication between the Sepoy lines for various cantonments. After the 7th other irregular cavalry had refused to accept the new cartridges in the early May, they wrote to the 48th Native Infantry that they had acted for the faith and awaited the 48th orders. Sepoys or their emissaries moved from one station to another. People were thus planning and talking about the rebellion, the pattern of the mutinies, and the pieces of the evidence that suggest some sort of planning and coordination raise certain crucial questions. How were the plans made? Who were the planners? It is difficult on the basis of the available documents to provide direct answers to such questions. But incident, one incident provides clues as to how the mutinies came to be so organized. Captain Hearsay of the Awadh military police had been given protection by his Indian subordinates during the mutiny. The 41st Native Infantry, which was stationed in the same place, that is in the Awadh, insisted that since they had killed all their white officers, the military police should also kill Hearsay or deliver him as prisoner to the 41st. The military police refused to do either, and it was decided that the matter would be settled by a panchayat composed of native officers drawn from each regiment. Charles Ball, who wrote one of the earliest histories of the uprising, noted that panchayats were a nightly occurrence in the Kanpur Sepoy lines. What this suggests is that some of the decisions were taken collectively. Given the fact that the sepoys lived in the lines uh, uh, and shared a common lifestyle, and that many of them came from the same caste, it is not difficult to imagine them sitting together to decide their own future. The sepoys were the makers of their own rebellion. Next arrow. Francois Sisten, Sisten, Francois Sisten, a native Christian police inspector in Sitapur. Tehsildar was later identified as the principal rebel leader of Bijnor. 1c. Leaders and followers. Kanpur. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib, successor of Peshwa Bajirao II. Jhansi Rani Lakshmibai, Kanwar Singh, a local zamindar in Arha in Bihar. In Awadh, Lucknow, British Qadir, son of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah. Shahamal mobilized the villagers of the Pargana Baraut in UP. Gunu, a tribal cultivator of Singhbhum in Chotanagpur, became a rebel leader of the core tribals of the region. Shahamal, clan of the Jat cultivators. His men attacked government buildings, destroyed the bridge over the river, and dug up metal roads partly to prevent government forces from coming into the area, and partly because bridges and roads were seen as symbols of British rule. Next arrow. Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah preached jihad, that is religious war against the British, popularly called the Danka Shah, the Maulvi with the drum Danka. In 1857, he was jailed in Faizabad. When released, he was elected by the mutinous 22nd Native Infantry as the leader. Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah or the Danka Shah fought in the famous Battle of Chinhut, in which British forces under the Henry Lawrence were defeated. 1D. Rumors and prophecies. Rumor that the new cartridges were greased with the fat of the cows and the pigs spread like wildfire. Another rumor. Captain Wright, commandant of the Rifle Instruction Depot, reported that in the third week of the January 1857, a low-caste Khalsi who worked in the magazine in the Damdam had asked a Brahmin sepoy for a drink of water from his lota. The sepoy had refused, saying that the lower caste touch would defile the lota. Khalsi resorted. Khalsi retorted, "You will soon lose your caste, as ere long you will have to bite cartridges covered with the fat of the cows and pigs." We do not know the veracity of the report, but nothing was done to allay the fears of the sepoys. Another, British government had hatched a gigantic conspiracy to destroy the caste and religion of the Hindus of and Muslims. To this end, the rumor said, the British had mixed the bone dust of cows and pigs into the flour that was sold in the market. Fear and suspicion that British wanted them to convert to Christianity. British officers tried to allay their fears, but in vain. The response to the call for action was reinforced by the prophecy that British rule would come to an end on the centenary of the Battle of Plassey on 3 June 1857. Chapatis were being distributed from village to village. A person would come at night and give a chapati to the watchman of the village and ask him to make 5 more and distribute to the next village, and so on. The meaning and the purpose of the distribution of the chapatis was not clear, and it is not clear even today. Next arrow image. Henry Hardinge by Francis Grant in 1849. As Governor General, Henry Hardinge attempted to modernize the equipment of the army. The Enfield rifles that were introduced initially used the grease cartridges the sepoys rebelled against. 1E. Why did the people believe in rumors? Rumors circulate only when they resonate with the deeper fears and suspicion of the people. Rumors make sense when seen in the context of the policies the British pursued from the late 1820s. Under Governor General Lord William Bentinck, the British adopted policies aimed at reforming Indian society by introducing Western education, Western ideas, and Western institutions. With the cooperation of sections of the Indian society, they set up English medium schools, colleges, and universities which taught Western sciences and the liberal arts. Laws to abolish sati in 1829 and to permit remarriage of the Hindu widows. On misgovernment and refusal to recognize adoption, annexed like Awadh, Jhansi, and Satara. British introduced on these their own laws and their own methods of land revenue, land settlement, and land revenue collection. It seemed to the people that all they, it seemed to the people that all that they cherished and held sacred, from kings and social religious customs to patterns of land holding and revenue payment, was being destroyed and replaced by a system that was more impersonal, alien, and oppressive. This perception was aggravated by the activities of the Christian missionaries. In such a situation of uncertainty, rumors spread with remarkable swiftness. Second point, Awadh in revolt. 2a. A cherry that will drop into our mouth one day. In 1851, Governor General Lord Dalhousie gave this statement. The conquest happened in stages. The subsidiary alliance had been imposed on Awadh in 1808. According to it, the Nawab had to disband his military force, allow the British to position their troops in the kingdom, and act in accordance with the advice of the British resident, who was now to be attached to the court. Nawab now could no longer assert control over the rebellious chiefs and talukdars. Next arrow. Resident was the designation of a representative of the Governor General who lived in a state which was not under the direct British rule. Next point. Not under the direct British rule. Important point. Next point. British felt that the soil here, that is Awadh, was good for producing indigo and cotton. By the early 1850s, all major areas of India had been conquered. The Maratha lands, the Doab, Carnatic, Punjab and Bengal. The takeover of the Awadh in 1856 was expected to complete a process of territorial annexation that had begun with the conquest of the Bengal almost a century earlier. Next arrow, subsidiary alliance, devised by the Lord Wellesley in 1798, had to accept certain terms and conditions. A. The British would be responsible for protecting their ally from the external and internal threats to their power. B. In the territory of the ally, a British armed contingent would be stationed. C. The ally would have to provide the resources for maintaining the contingent. D. The ally could enter into agreements with other rulers or engage in warfare only with the permission of the British. 2b. The life was gone out of the body. In Awadh, Nawab Wajid Ali Shah was dethroned and exiled to Calcutta on the plea that the region was being misgoverned. British government also wrongly assumed that Wajid Ali Shah was an unpopular ruler. The widespread sense of the grief and the loss at the Nawab's exile was recorded by many contemporary observers. One of them wrote, "The life was gone out of the body, and the body of this town had been left lifeless. There was no street or market and house which did not wail out the cry of agony in separation of Jan-e-Alam." One folk song bemoaned that the honorable English came and took the country. Angrez Bahadur aaye और मुल्क ले लियो. Then next point is 2c. Firangi Raj and the end of the world. In Awadh, more than anywhere else, the revolt became an expression of popular resistance to an alien order. The annexation displaced not just the Nawab, it also dispossessed the talukdars of the region. Before the coming of the British, talukdars maintained armed retainers, built forts, and enjoyed a degree of autonomy as long as they accepted the suzerainty of the Nawab and paid the revenue of their taluks. Some of the bigger talukdars had as many as 12,000 foot soldiers, and even smaller ones had about 200. The British were unwilling to tolerate the power of the talukdars. Immediately after the annexation, the talukdars were disarmed and their forts destroyed. The British land revenue policy further undermined the position and authority of the talukdars. After annexation, the first British revenue settlement, known as the Summary Settlement of 1856, was based on the assumption that the talukdars were interlopers with no permanent stakes in the land. They had established their hold over land through the force and fraud. The Summary Settlement of 1856 proceeded to remove the talukdars wherever possible. The talukdars of the southern Awadh were the hardest hit, and some lost more than half of the total number of villages they had previously held. British land revenue officers believed that by removing talukdars, they would be able to settle the land with the actual owners of the soil and thus reduce the level of the exploitation of the peasants while increasing revenue returns for the state. But this did not happen in the practice. Revenue flows for the state increased, but the burden of the demand on the peasants did not decline. Officials soon found that large areas of the Awadh were actually heavily overassessed. The increase of the revenue demand in some places was from 30 to 70%. Thus, neither talukdars nor peasants had any reasons to be happy with the annexation. The dispossession of talukdars meant the breakdown of an entire social order. In pre-British times, the talukdars were oppressors, but many of them also appeared to be generous father figures. They exacted a variety of dues from the peasant, but were often considerate in time of the need. Now, under British, the peasant was directly exposed to the overassessment of revenue and inflexible methods of collection. There was no longer any guarantee that in times of hardship or crop failure, the revenue demand of the state would be reduced or collection postponed, or that in times of festivities the peasant would get the loan and support that the talukdar had earlier provided. Many of these talukdars were loyal to the Nawab of Awadh, and they joined Begum Hazrat Mahal, the wife of the Nawab, in Lucknow to fight the British. Some even remained with her in the defeat. A vast majority of sepoys from the Awadh. For decades, sepoys had complained of low levels of pay and the difficulty of getting leave. The relationship of the sepoys with the superior white officers underwent a significant change in the years preceding the uprising of the 1857. In the 1820s, white officers made it a point to maintain friendly relations with the sepoys. They would take part in their leisure activities. They wrestled with them, fenced with them, and went out hawking with them. Many of them were fluent in Hindustani and were familiar with the customs and culture of the country. These officers were disciplinarian and father figures rolled into one. Disciplinarian and father figures rolled into one. In 1840s, this began to change. Officials developed a sense of superiority and started treating sepoys as their racial inferiors. Abuse and physical violence became common. Trust was replaced by suspicion. Many of the sepoys from Awadh were Brahmins or from the upper castes. Awadh was, in fact, called the nursery of the Bengal army. The link between the sepoys and the rural world had important implications in the course of the uprising. When the sepoys defied their superior officers and took up arms, they were joined very swiftly by their brethren, by brethren in the villages. Everywhere, peasants poured into towns and joined the soldiers and the ordinary people of the towns in collective act of rebellion. Third point, what the rebels wanted. Other than a few proclamations and ishtihars, that is notifications, issued by the rebel leaders to propagate their ideas and persuade people to join the revolt, we do not have much that throws light on on the perspective of the rebels. 3a. The vision of the unity. The rebel proclamations of the Atharas Tunja repeatedly appeal to all sections of the population, irrespective of their caste and creed. The ishtihars, that is notifications, harked back to the pre-British Hindu-Muslims past and glorified the coexistence of different communities under the Mughal Empire. The proclamation that was issued under the name of the Bahadur Shah appealed to the people to join the fight under the standards of both Muhammad and Mahavir. In Bareilly, in western UP, in December 1857, the British spent rupees 50,000 to incite the Hindu population against the Muslims. The attempt failed. Bareilly, Next arrow, Azamgarh Proclamation, 25 August 1857. A main source about what the rebels wanted. Section 1, regarding zamindars, Jumas, that is revenue demand. JUMAS, Jumas, revenue demand. Section 2, regarding merchants. Section 3, regarding public servants. Section 4, regarding artisans. Section 5, regarding pandits, fakirs, and other learned persons. Next arrow, Arzis of rebel sepoys. Arzi mean petition or application. Then comes the 3b, against the symbols of oppression. What enraged the people was what enraged the people was how British land revenue settlement had dispossessed landholders, both big and small, and foreign commerce had driven artisans and weavers to ruin. Attack all those who were seen as allies of the British. Often the rebels deliberately sought to humiliate the elites of a city. They burnt account books and ransacked moneylenders' houses. Rebel against all oppressors. It presents a glimpse of an alternative vision, perhaps of a more egalitarian society. Such visions were not articulated in the proclamations which sought to unify all social groups in the fights against Firangi Raj. 3c. The search for alternative power. The administrative structures established by the rebels were primarily aimed at meeting the demands of the war. However, in most cases, these structures could not survive the British onslaught. But in Awadh, where resistance to the British lasted longest, plans of counter-attack were being drawn up by the Lucknow court, and hierarchies of command were in place as late as the last months of the 1857 and the early part of the 1858. Fourth point, repression. Not only was the whole of the North India put under the martial law, but military officers and even ordinary Britons were given the power to try and punish Indians supported of rebellion. In other words, the ordinary process of the law and trial was suspended, and it was put out that rebellion would have only one punishment, death. British recognized the symbolic value of Delhi. Thus, a two-pronged attack. One force moved from Calcutta to New Delhi, and other from Punjab, which was largely peaceful, to reconquer Delhi. Sorry, one force moved from Calcutta to northern India, and other from the Punjab, which was largely peaceful, to reconquer Delhi. Only in late September that in Delhi, only in late September that the Delhi was finally captured. Time taken because the rebels from all over North India had come to Delhi to defend the capital. As soon as they began their counter-insurgency operations, the British realized that they were not dealing with a mere mutiny, but an uprising that had huge popular support. In Awadh, for example, a military official called Forsyth estimated that three-fourths of the adult male population was in rebellion, controlled by March 1858. In large parts of the present-day UP, where big landholders and peasants had offered united resistance, the British tried to break up the unity by promising to give back to the big landholders their estates. Rebel landholders were dispossessed and loyal rewarded. Many landholders died fighting the British, or they escaped into Nepal, where they died of illness or starvation. Next arrow image: a mosque on Delhi Ridge, photo by Felice Beato, Felice Beato. Next image of Sikandra Bagh in Lucknow by Felice Beato, built by Nawab Wajid Ali Shah. Next image of the principal centers of the revolt: Peshawar, Karachi, Lahore, Jalandhar. Peshawar, Karachi, Lahore, Jalandhar, Ambala, Saharanpur, Meerut, Delhi, Aligarh, Mathura, Agra, Ajmer, Lucknow, Kanpur, Azamgarh, Gwalior, Jhansi, Allahabad, Banaras, Jabalpur, Ahmedabad, Mahau, Surat, Aurangabad, Bombay, Kata, Kolkata, Damdam, and Chittagong. Fifth point: images of the revolt. 5 ways celebrating the saviors. Some of the images commemorate the British heroes who saved the English and repressed the rebels. For example, relief of the Lucknow. When the rebel forces besieged Lucknow, Henry Lawrence, the commissioner of the Lucknow, collected the Christian population and took refuge in a heavily fortified residence. Lawrence was killed, but the residency continued to be defended under the command of the Colonel Inglis. On 20 September, James Outram and Henry Havelock arrived, outsaw the rebel forces, and reinforced the British garrisons. 20 days later, Colin Campbell, who was appointed as the new commander of the British forces in India, came with his forces and rescued the besieged British garrison. Relief of Lucknow. Barker's painting celebrates the moment of the Campbell's entry. At the center of the canvas are British heroes Campbell, Outram, and Havelock. 5b. English Woman and the Honor of the Britain. In Memoriam was painted by Joseph Noel Patton. 2 years after the mutiny, it does not throw it does not show gory violence, it only suggests it. It seeks to provoke anger and fury. It represents the rebel as violent and brutish, even though they remain invisible in the picture. In the background, you can see the British rescue forces arriving as saviors. Miss Wheeler defending herself against sepoys in Kanpur. In this image, rebels are demonized. Here, four burly males with swords and guns are shown attacking a woman. The woman's struggle to save her honor and her life, in fact, is represented as having a deeper religious connotation. It is a battle to save the honor of the Christianity. The book lying on the floor is the Bible. Next is the 5C: Vengeance and Retribution. Justice Punch. Justice Punch. 12/9/1857. An allegorical female figure of justice with a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. Her posture is aggressive. Her face expresses rage and the desire for revenge. She is tempting. She is templing sepoys under her feet, while a mass of Indian women with children cover with fear. Next image: the British Lion's vengeance on the Bengal tiger. Punch in 1857. Next image of the execution of mutineers in Peshawar, blowing from the guns. Mounted soldiers and sepoys in uniform dominate the scene. They have to watch the execution of their fellow sepoys and experience the chilling consequences of rebellion. Then 5D, the performance of terror. Next arrow image: execution of mutinous sepoys in Peshawar in London News, 3 October 20. In this scene, 12 rebels hang in a row with cannons all around them. What you see is not a routine punishment, it is a performance of terror. For it is to instill fear among people, punishment could not be discreetly meted out in enclosed spaces. It had to be theatrically performed in the open. Then 5E, no time for clemency. Clemency means mercy or lenience, that is Shamadan. When Governor General Canning declared that a gesture of leniency and a show of mercy would help in winning back the loyalty of the Sepoys, he was mocked in the British press. In Punch, a British journal of the comic satire, Canning is shown as a looming father figure with his protective hand over the head of his sepoy, who still holds an unsheathed sword in one hand and a dagger in the other, both dipping in the blood. 5F Nationalist imageries. It was celebrated as the first war of independence in which all sections of the people of the India came together to fight against the imperial rule. In the lines of the Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी 1801. And then came the timeline in the end. 1801. Subsidiary alliance introduced by the Velacy and Awadh. 1856. Nawab Wajid Ali Shah deposed. Awadh annexed. 1855 summary revenue settlements introduced in the Awadh by British. 1857 में mutiny starts in the minute. 11-12 में दिल्ली garrisons revolted. बहादुर शाह accepts nominal leadership. 20-27 मई spy mutinies in Aligarh, Etawah, Mainpur and Etah. 30 मई rising in Lucknow. May June mutiny turns into a general revolt of people. 30 June British suffered defeat in Battle of Chinhut under the Maulvi Ahmadullah Shah or Danka Shah. 25 September British forces under the Havelock and Outram enter the residency in Lucknow. In July Shah Amal killed in battle. 1857 June Rani Jhansi killed in the battle.